All right, let me share my screen. All right, y'all can see my screen, right? Oh, let me know when y'all can see it.
Yes.
All right,
Yeah, I
awesome.
can see it.
So now we're on chapter 6. Now, before we go further, let's review a little bit. So let's take a little time, probably take 20 minutes. Let's kind of go back over the fundamentals from the beginning, because to get us up to this point, so you ask questions and we can, jog your memory, especially if it's something you may not remember. So it's okay. So we're going to start off first, and I'm going to ask y'all some questions. So right here, the data and variables. My question to you is this: what is a variable? Now, I know you haven't read this yet, Shanae, but we'll go over it. Xander and Brandisha.
Heard the term, but I remember the term.
Which one?
Like variable.
Okay. So you don't you know what it is, but you can't remember the term, right?
I remember the term. I don't know what it is.
Don't know what it does. Okay. Variables. Okay. So Xander, do you know
what a variable is?
Yeah, what is a variable?
I don't fully remember the full meaning of a variable, so
no problem. And this is why we review, because the further you go along, you start forgetting stuff, right? Because you're using it all the time. Now, the reason why I like to review before we go forward, because I want to lament in your mind that you understand this. So now, Ying, what's a variable? Are you on, Ying? Maybe she's still muted. All right, so a variable. Let me get my little thing up here. Let me get the annotations going. All right, so here in programming, the lifeblood of any programming language is the variable. This right here, that's the lifeblood right there. Let me get rid of that other one. So this is the lifeblood of every programming language, is your variable. And a variable is just a container. It holds all of your values. Up here, we said we call them values and data types. And we're gonna kind of talk about that just to refresh your memory. But a variable, all it is a container. So when you think of a variable, and don't laugh at container, don't laugh at what I'm doing, because I'm using a mouse and I might not even spell it right because I'm recording and I'm talking and I may not spell it right, but it's just a container. So let's put it in perspective here. Let's use shoes, right? Y'all like shoes, right? Everybody like shoes?
Yes.
Okay, so you got a special pair of shoes that you ordered. And what you did, when you get those shoes, you got you this special box that you're gonna put those shoes in. Now, we got to look at the syntax, right? We got to understand the syntax. Well, that variable is a container. So when you get those special shoes in, you take them out of the box that it came in, but you put them in that special box that you're going to keep your shoes in. Now, that special box, you gave it a name. What would be the name of that box? You put in those special shoes, what would you call that box? Anybody, would you give it a special name? But it's not a clear box. It's just a nice box. And you want to know what's in that box. What would you call that box that you have the shoes in? What would you call it?
A holder.
You could call it a holder, but let's say it's a special shoe. You want to be descriptive, right? So what is it? Let's say you got a special whatever those
box.
Yeah, or you could Jordans, right? There might be some Jordan. I like Jordans. Air Force Ones, or some kind of special shoe, expensive shoe, right? Some name designer shoe. You got some designer shoe that came. and they have a name. So let's use Air Force Ones. So you got these Air Force Ones that's limited edition, and you're going to put them inside this box. On that box, you're going to write Air Force One. And that means that's what's in that box. And you put them in there, and you close it up. Now you have a reference, right? So when you walk by and you see that box and it has the name Air Force One, you know what's inside of it, don't you?
Right.
That's what a variable is. A variable is a descriptive container that's holding data or values, data types, which are values. So let's start there first, because I want you to see that, because we want to review this. So let's go over here to the data type. Let me get my mouse. So I'm going to click on this one right here. So let's go to values and data types. Remember what it says. Programs may be thought of as being made up of two things: data and operations that manipulate data. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
All right, so we know that you have is a program. Inside programs are the thought of it being the two things: data and operations that manipulate data. Now, here it tells us in this inside of this. Let me move that out the way, because it's not staying where I want to stay. So this chapter focuses primarily on the first of these two fundamental components. We're talking about data, and it says data can be stored in a program in a variety of ways. The most basic unit of data is a value. Now, do y'all remember when we talked about this, Ying and Vandisha, because y'all been coming here frequently, y'all been consistent, right?
Mhm.
We have a syntax, right?
Mhm.
What is the syntax? And this is, yeah, we explain it to, because the more you explain it, the more you get the concept. I want to make sure Xander and Shanae understands. What is, if I ask you to declare a variable, how would I do that? Or if you don't know, if one of you, Ying or Brandisha, who wants to answer that?
Would declaring it be naming it?
Yeah, and what would I do? So let's say I want a number. How would I declare a variable number or num? Or let's call it sum, S-U-M. How would I declare that? I just want to declare it.
Mm.
I need a keyword.
Would you use the console.log?
Well, that's the console.log is, and I will explain it to you, that's something to print to, that's the actual object and the method, but not to declare a variable. Remember, we need either a let,
Oh.
and what else? What's the name? We call it sum, right?
Yeah.
Now, if I just want to declare a variable, this is all I have to do. And that's a semicolon, if that wasn't plain to everyone. I need to have a keyword, which is let const of var, right? That's declaring that variable sum, right?
Mm.
Now, how do I initialize that variable sum? With a number, or better yet, an expression, if y'all remember.
Ambition.
Uh-huh. You need assignment operator.
Okay.
And I said I wanted an expression because I want a sum of something. So I may say, what's 5 plus 5, right?
Mm-hmm.
We know that's an expression. But what's going to be stored in that variable is a value. Yeah, remember that?
Yeah.
Okay. Now to Xander and Shanae. This equal sign is called an assignment operator. When you're new into programming, don't call it an equal sign because it will confuse you. Give it its legal name, which is a assignment operator. So these are called assignment operators. And what an assignment operator is just like how it sounds. It assigns a value to a variable. So everything on the left of the assignment operator is a variable. Everything to the right of assignment operator is the value or the data, which is a value, which this right here is an expression because it's two or more values. When you got two or more values, that becomes an expression. But this is just high level because I don't want to confuse you later on when it's time for us to use arrays and objects. That's totally different. That will still be considered one value. But this is just a refresher. So we're understanding that this is an assignment operator right here, this equal sign. And this is a variable right here, that's sum. And then this expression is 5 plus 5. And what's going to be stored in sum is not going to be 5 plus 5, but it's going to be 10, because that's the value. At the top, we just declared the variable. At the bottom here, we initialize the variable. Now, I don't have to declare a variable. I can initialize a variable and declare it at the same time. All I have to do is put the let right here. And then this right here, I erase. I don't need this. So the second part is declaring and initializing, which we'll go over that more in the chapters. I just want to kind of get you guys to, and ladies, to kind of review. So as we go further, because if I go forward, you might not remember, oh man, what about all that other stuff? I don't know what that is. So as you see here, we're talking about a value. A value is a specific piece of data, such as a word or a number. Some examples like 5, 5.2, or 5.2, and hello world, these are all considered values. But notice the difference here. Anything inside of quotes is what we call a string. If it doesn't have quotes, it is a number. Now, who can tell me what are the 7 primitive data types?
String,
That's one.
Boolean.
Mhm.
What was another one? Float.
Nope, you're thinking of Java. We're in JavaScript.
Okay. What was another one? Integer.
Nope, you're thinking of Java,
No.
JavaScript. But you got 2. You got string, you got number. No, you got string, you got Boolean. So I just gave you the third one, number.
I don't think I know any.
That's okay.
I think in the past we listed undefined, symbol, and big int.
And one more.
Then no.
There you go. No, those are primitive data types. Every programming language has a primitive data type. Now, I need y'all to remember this. Everything in JavaScript, because we're just talking about JavaScript, not Java. JavaScript and Java are 2 totally different languages. But everything in JavaScript is an object except for
The 7 primitive data types.
There we go. So primitive data types are not objects. Why aren't they objects? Why are primitive data types not objects?
Because they're immutable. They don't have methods or properties.
There you go. So as we go further on into this will make more sense when we get to objects, what we're talking about. When we talk about primitive data types, because they're immutable, they can't change. So if I use the string, it's going to be a string. If I want a new string, I can't mutate it. I can't change it. So for instance, let me do this. Show you how to use the tool. Y'all see my console, right? You see my
Mhm.
console.log. You can do so much stuff in here. So if I go here and I create num and I assign it the number 5, what I just did was I declared and I initialized that variable num. I hit enter, it says undefined. The reason why in this console it says undefined because it doesn't have a return. That's the reason why you'll see undefined, but it did store. It's now stored in memory in your browser. Now, you said something earlier, Xander, about console.log, right? Console.log represents this right here. This is the console right here. This is an object in programming language, console. .log is a method, and we'll talk about that more later. But now I want to know what number is. What is the syntax that I got to write to find out what number? I want to print that to the console. What do I need to write? What num is, just in case I didn't know what num was. What do I need to write? I gave you a hint.
Sorry, you're asking about how we find out the data type?
Yep. Now,
Okay.
how can I just print it real quick? I want to print what
Oh,
number.
just print?
Yeah.
Okay, so like Xander said, console.log to start. And then in parentheses, you want to print, is that num?
Yeah.
Okay, yep. And then you have to, end it with a semicolon.
Also, and if I hit enter, I should get back 5, right?
Right.
There you go. So it printed out 5. It's being stored. Now, the thing about JavaScript, it's a dynamically typed language. I can change the value of num in JavaScript. You can't do that in Java because Java is statically typed. But here in Java, if I wanted to change the data type of this num, all I have to do is type num, and then I assign it a new value. Hit enter. Now, if I do console.log, and I console.log num now, what is going to print? 5 or 7?
It'll print the most recent data, which is 7.
Correct. All right, so let's take a step back. For those that's looking at this, why? Because I want y'all to think like programmers, think like developers. Why did that? Just go by what we just talked about. What just happened? What did I just do? What did I just teach y'all? We declared and initialized a variable with the number 5. We just checked and printed it to the console with a console.log. Now, and then we changed the data type by, notice that on num assigned to 7, I didn't use let, did I?
No.
Because I didn't have to, you only have to declare it one time within scope, and we'll talk about that later. But I didn't have to put let in front of it because right now in memory, it's already stored in memory. So I didn't have to declare it again. It's already been declared once. All I have to do is initialize it from here on out. But guess what else I can do? Now we said that variables should be descriptive, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I take num, we had a number in there. What'll happen if I did that? What will happen? I'm gonna hit enter. What just happened?
It's a string, so it came out as the written 7 instead of the number 7.
Correct. So now I can check that, right? How do I check that? How do I check num now? I want to find out what data type is inside num. What do I need to do?
Um,
I'm gonna use a property, or they call it a method.
oh,
What is it called?
Would you use the council.log? Or?
Well, we got the council.log, but I want to know what the data type that's in num right now. What's that keyword? What's that I need? Let's see if yeah, I see it right there.
Type of.
There we go. Type of.
Oh, yeah.
And notice how it's spelled. You got to spell it correctly, because if I spell it with a capital O, a camel case, it's not going to work. It's a string, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can change the data type in JavaScript. And that's where you got to be very careful, because it can give you bugs in your program. But later on, once you get the hang of all this stuff and understand the rules and the principle, we'll show you how to handle all of that. Well, I'll show you how to handle it. We'll go through it in the book as well. But right now, who has questions? Is there any questions?
Mm-hmm.
No questions?
No.
So, okay. Well, I want y'all to, we did a little bit of reviewing. I want y'all to go back and review 4 and 5 again, because what do you want to, keep jogging keep that information stuck. We want it to stick, because as you go through these chapters, you're only going to remember maybe 10% of it. And that gets very frustrating, doesn't it? When someone asks you a question, you're like, I just supposed to know this. How come I don't know this? And then you feel like, but don't feel bad. I go over this constantly, over and over again, and over some more. So some of this stuff comes to me like second nature, because I've done it so much and done it for so long. You're going to get there, but we're taking it one step at a time. So right now, we kind of did a little bit of a review. We haven't gone too deep, because there's a lot of stuff in here in chapter 4. And as a matter of fact, I'm reshooting all those videos once I get unit 2 done. I'm getting ready to shoot those videos, get those done for launch code. I'm gonna come back and reshoot all of unit 1, which is all JavaScript, and really give some really nice videos. That's the goal. I'll hopefully get to live up to that. So anybody have any questions about data types and variables before I move on? Anything that might stand out here that, you know what, I need to ask a little bit more questions about that. Well, the best way to do this is to, of course, practice, go through it again and read up on it. So now, a little quick review on making decisions with conditionals. Anybody have any questions about that? All right, I got a question for you. All right, let me go over here to the conditional. All right, here we go. This is the syntax, right, of a condition. It's an if statement, right? Is that what we're looking at?
Mm-hmm.
Huh?
Yes.
Yes. Now, do y'all remember, a condition is a conditional, it does a check, right? There's keywords you should be looking for when someone is asking you to solve a problem. If I say, I want you to check or to validate some code, what should come into your mind? You should be thinking a condition, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everything inside of the parentheses in this if statement, in this condition, this parenthesis is what you're checking or comparing. Who remembers truthy and falsy?
Slightly. That's slightly.
Y'all don't remember truthy and falsy?
Just a little.
Just a little. That's okay. In this condition right here, remember everything inside these parentheses right here, whatever you're comparing, it's always true, unless you make it false. So this is always going to be truthy. And everything that's true, whenever you're comparing something, so for instance, is 5 equal to 5. So let me type that out for you. So here. So if I say in this condition right here, if 5, and in JavaScript, we use double equals and triple equals to represent equality. And there's a difference between double equals and triple equals. A double equal is a soft equal. Triple equals are strict equal. Where double equals, it can convert a data type. Where a strict equal, it compares the data types. That makes sense?
Yes.
Okay, so let me give you an example first. So here, if I say is if I say is 5 double equal to the string 5, is that true?
No, because it can't convert word. Because that would be a string.
No. All right, so that's okay. That's correct. You're very correct, because that's a string, but don't let that fool you though, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's do this. Let me see if I can get a cursor. Okay. So that would be false.
Right.
But what about this one? Is 5 equal to the string 5? That's a double equals though.
That would be true.
Yep. Why?
When it's the like a number in the string, doesn't it make it match whatever the conditional number is?
It'll match it'll convert the data type.
Yeah.
But it has to be a number.
Yeah.
So the number 5, and it only really works with numbers. And so the number 5, and this goes back to binary numbers. Remember the table, binary numbers? It goes back to binary numbers. That number 5 has a value assigned to it in binary numbers. So when the compiler, it sees that string, it knows it's a string. But that next character, because of the double equals, it says, oh, wait a minute. That has a same value. So yes, they're equal because their values are equal. So let's step back for a second. In programming languages, there's high level and there's low level language. What's the difference? Anybody know? Zan, do you know? Shanae, I had a chance to read any of the curriculum yet. Do you know?
No. What was the question again?
What is the difference, or what does it mean? What does high level language mean and low level language mean?
Oh, no, I don't know.
Is high level something like human readable?
Uh-huh.
And then low level is more what the computer reads, what the compiler reads.
That's right. It's machine readable, meaning that and remember that term, because you're going to experience this term a lot in your career, but they're going to leave off language. They're just going to say high level. And that gets kind of confusing because you got to keep in context what they're talking about. So think about it for a second. If from what we understand before you got into programming, when you hear the word high level, what do you normally think of?
I would think it would be like something like super important, like something that's at the top, like, you know, like executive level and like an organization. Like that's what I would think.
Yep. And that's what I used to think until finally one day I'm like, what are they talking about when they I was like, they kept saying this is a high level. I said, this don't make sense. What they talking about? And so you got to know the context and when it's being used. When they use it in programming language, they're talking about human readable. Or if they tell you, we're going to give you the high level view of breaking down this particular concept, you got to think about the 20-80 rule. The tip of the iceberg is just 20%. That's all you see. You don't see the other 80% that's below the surface, right?
Mhm.
So you gotta, when they say it, you gotta understand the context that they're using it in, because it can get confusing if you try to apply it to what you already understand. So when I used to hear high level all the time, yeah, we're talking about the high level, I was thinking, I said, yeah, this is very important. And that's not what they meant. It's just like, it's human readable. So when we get into writing our code, we're writing it in our language. So we all speak English here, right? So that's the language we're gonna write it in. If you're an Arabic speaking person, you're going to write it in Arabic. If you're Asian speaking, it's going to be written in either a Mandarin or a Japanese, in those different type of languages. But it all has to be converted to binary. That's what's crazy about it. So high level is how I write it, how we can read it. Low level, the machine, the computer, what I just typed right here, the computer cannot read that. It has to be converted. So that means that it's called an open parenthesis that has a value assigned to it in binary numbers. It goes to the next space. Oh, it has a value, which is a number, which is that means it don't see the number 5. It sees a binary code for number 5. And that is assigned to a value. And we'll talk about that later on. And then it sees these double equals. It knows that, okay, this is comparing the next thing to tell me if it's softly equals. And that sees that string, another data type, which is a string. But then when it goes into it, it knows it's a totally different data type. But when it reads the value that's inside that string, it comes back, well, this number, this binary value matches this binary value. So guess what? We're going to say that's equal. But that's not how it works. That's not how it works for if you do strictly equal. If I add that extra equal sign right there, is that going to be true, anybody? Or is that going to be false? Is 5 strictly equal to the string 5?
I think in this case, it is going to come out as false, because when we have the 3, that's when it really is going to strictly compare the data types.
That's right. The data types have to match. You're going to use this more in your programming career. You're not going to use double equal. You're going to always, most likely, 99% of the time, use strictly equal. Because if you use that double equal, it may not give you the results you're looking for. So you want to use strictly, because we're going to be mostly comparing data types in our programming language. All right, that makes sense. But the main part of this, the reason why I hopped on this, is because inside this parenthesis, this is looking for this to be true. Is 5 strictly equal to 5, which we know that's false. Well, if it was true, it would run the first code block. But since it's false, it will go to the next code block, or it'll go outside these curly braces. We don't have to have an else conditional here. It just knows it won't print them, but we may put an else there because we may want to print something. So here within this code, it says right here, some code. If this condition is true, so if I do the double equals, that's true. So inside the code block, which is this curly braces, I may do a console.log that says true or correct. I put a string called console.log correct. So I'll put a string with correct in it, right? But if I have the strictly equal, the triple equal there, I know that's going to be false. So I may have an else here with another curly braces, and then have a console.log in the code block that says not correct, which we'll look at that later. I just want y'all to remember anything inside these parentheses have to evaluate to true. It's looking for it to be true. If it's true, it would print the first block. If it's false, we made it false. So right now that's false because we know those two are not going to be, they're not going to compare, right? So it's going to run my else conditional. Make sense? Any questions? All right, so that was another high level view, right? We just did a high level view, and we just kind of what we did was we went back and we reviewed a little bit. There's so much here that you want to go through and take your time and read and play around with the code, right? So now what we're here for today, we're here for errors and debugging. Did anybody get a chance to read this chapter?
I started reading. I didn't finish.
Okay, let's read it a little bit, okay? So here, programming is a complex process. Since it is done by human beings, errors often occur. Let me ask you a question. Who here doesn't make any mistakes? Does anybody here don't make any mistakes? Why do y'all find it interesting that you got to be taught to do it right? But doing it wrong comes natural. You ever thought about that? You ain't got to teach me how to do it wrong. That comes natural.
Right.
We know how to say the wrong thing. We know how to break stuff, don't we? May not know how to fix it, but we know how to break. We can break it easy, can't we? It's easy to tear down than it is to build up, isn't it?
Yes.
So what's crazy about this is a true statement that since it is done by human beings, errors often occur. Programming errors are all called bugs. We call them bugs. And it's a little article right here if you ever clicked on it and read it. And it kind of tells you a little bit about it right here. But it says, and the process of tracking them down and correcting them is called debugging. Some claim that in 1947, a dead moth caused a problem in one of the first computers. The term bug has remained in use since to refer to any issue that prevents a program from working as intended. Wikipedia even has an image of the supposed first bug. So you can click on it to see what that first bug looked like. So that's it. That's what they said. So here, remember this. This is very important. Let me highlight this for y'all. Remember these right here. 3 kinds of errors can occur in programming. Somebody read those for me. What are those 3 errors?
Syntax error, runtime errors, and logic errors.
There's only 3 errors, and you're going to experience all 3 of them. We will first learn about each type of error, and then we will discuss strategies for debugging code, reducing errors. All right, so let me ask you this question. All of y'all have some experience, right? You know right from wrong, right? What if you know something that you're doing is wrong? How do you prevent doing it if you know it's wrong? How can you protect or put a fail-safe in to keep from doing it wrong? Xander, you unmuted yourself. You want to answer that?
What was the question?
All right. We all know when right from wrong, right?
Yeah.
Let me give it to you. Let me break it down on your term. Okay. Now, your mother expects you to keep your room clean, right?
Yeah.
She does, right? What happens if you don't clean your room?
Punished, I guess.
That's a problem, isn't it? You got a problem, don't you? You got a serious problem if you don't clean that room. How do you prevent having that problem?
By doing what you're supposed to.
By cleaning that room, right? So let's go a little bit more detail. You got your room clean, but you don't have it organized, right? Now, she may expect you to fold your clothes or hang them up, right? She don't want you to just throw them in the closet, right? That's another problem, right? If you don't follow her instructions. So to prevent that, what do? The smart thing to do is to fold them up and hang them up, right?
Right.
But if you don't do that, guess what's going to happen? What's going to happen for you, Xander, besides getting punished?
You're gonna have a problem.
Yeah, because you're going to have to hear something you may not feel like hearing. Especially when you feel like you had a long, hard day. You worked hard at school, put in 6.5 hours, worked hard, got up early in the morning. You don't want to have to come home and hear your mother complaining, do you?
No.
So to prevent that, you clean your room up and fold up your clothes and hang them up. That's the smart thing to do, right? Well, we got to do the same thing in programming. We have these 3 errors that we're going to come in contact with. The best way to avoid these errors is by understanding the rules and the principles, right? Everything has rules and principles, right? Y'all familiar with that, right?
Yes.
You have rules and principles. I don't care where you work at. You got principles. You got rules. We call them following the employee handbook or whatnot. You gotta. They want you to be subordinate and all. You got rules and you got principles. Well, we have rules and principles. If you learn and understand the rules and principles, you can avoid a lot of these errors. And we're going to go deeper into these 3 types of errors. I don't want to prolong it here, but we're going to go through and throughout the study, right? And it says we will first learn about each type of error, and then we will discuss strategies for debugging code and reducing errors. Experience teaches you how to reduce the errors. It takes some time. In the beginning, a lot of you are going to write programs and forget semicolons. It may not affect your code, but then sometimes you may need that semicolon because it may break your code and you may not be able to find it. It'll be a runtime error. It says it's not going to run. The syntax is right, but you forgot that semicolon in this particular code block on this particular statement. So we want to continue to remember the rules and principles. I want to sink that into your brain today. Don't memorize syntax, memorize the rules and the principles, because the more you memorize those and start applying them, the more they make sense. So always think to yourself when you're writing programs, especially in the beginning, what's the rule here? What's the principle here that I need to be following? If you get in the habit of doing that, you will reduce those bugs. So here, beginning tips for debugging. Debugging a program requires a different approach compared to writing the original code. As you debug, think of yourself as a detective. Something has gone wrong and you must use clues, experience, intuition, trial and error, and an inquisitive spirit to solve the problem. Now, y'all have been, Randisha, y'all have been connected with me for a little while. And y'all watched the videos, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I do, I follow these principles. I look for clues, right?
Mm-hmm.
I look for clues. If I say when you're reading the curriculum, it says, I want you to print something to the council. What should come to your mind? To print it to the council. What should come to your mind?
Um,
It's an object and a method. And I gave you a clue when I said council.
okay.
So how do you
Sorry.
print the council?
Mm,
How do you print to the console? Let me show you what the console is again so you can visualize it. This is the console. I got it highlighted right there, the console. If I declare num and initialize it to 5, how do I print what's inside num to the console?
So you want to tell it to by saying console.log,
There you go.
but what are you printing? Num, and
There
that's what goes inside. Mhm.
That's right. That what goes inside. Now we'll go over this later. When you have a variable, you don't put strings around it. But I can also do this right here. I can go ahead and put console.log, and I could put the number. I could put something in here. I can type out my name. And when I hit enter, it's going to print out my name, Terrence. But I can also do this too, right? Whoa, I got an error. What kind of error do I have?
Syntax error.
And how do I fix that? What is it? Why do I have that syntax error? What's the rule and the principle? What's the rule here in JavaScript? And y'all learned this in chapter 4. Look at it closely. What I just typed, what's wrong with it?
So the computer isn't going to speak your language. You're going to have to speak its language, right? And if you have like an accent or something that's off, it's going to catch it. It's like that's what it's doing here, where it's catching something that doesn't sound right, look right, or make sense. So it's telling you there's an error. I think I see
Is
it.
your name spelled wrong?
Mm-mm,
No.
not my name. What's the?
Oh, the call. This you didn't have the no. Hold on.
I don't have what?
The console.log part.
All I did was declare and establish and initialized it, but I did something wrong. Look at it real close, and you can say it out loud. So
Name is
that name. Think like the compiler. If you're the compiler, how are you looking at this? You're breaking each and every character down.
right.
There's also a little clue in the error it's throwing you where it says unexpected token. And then in 6, we learned about how token is kind of like a symbol or a variable that's unexpected. So something here is unexpected. Something isn't matching.
Oh, you said a key word there, matching.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I see this time matching is your name. Spelling is wrong.
Because you're looking at the console.log. Look at the syntax of string. What's not matching?
Oh, is it the parentheses? Well,
no. The
not
quotes.
Yeah, that's what I meant. One is like
Yep.
single and one is double, like a
But
double.
what's the rule in JavaScript?
I have no idea.
String.
You can use either or, but it has to be, strings should preferably in JavaScript be in the double quotes.
Not just only, that's fine, but they have to match.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
That was the
Like
key.
the end quote and the beginning quote.
That's right. So the opening and the closing quote has to match. You can't have a double quote for the beginning and have an ending, single quote for the end. It's going to give you a syntactic error. So what is syntax? And we'll talk about that later because we'll break down what syntactic error. But I kind of want to let y'all to see that. So the way for me to fix that, and you could use, if you're in the console, let me show you how to find this. If you right click and do inspect right here, it'll pull up the console. But the shortcut to pulling up the console, if you're on a Mac, is Command Option I. If you're on a Windows, I think it's Control. Yeah, we got a Windows keyboard. Let me get a Windows keyboard. I got 50 million. It's going to be Control Alt I. I think that's what it is. Control Alt I is how you pull up the console. So let me show you how to fix it. And now, if I just want to go back up, all I got to do is hit my up arrow key. That's all I have to do. Now, if I come back here and I change that to a double, oh, I still didn't do a double quote. Change that to a double quote. It worked. It said I don't have an error, right? And then I can do the console.log. So where I have the name. All I got to do is pass the variable name. Now, let me show you something. I'm going to see if I catch this. Can I do that? Is this legal? Is that legal right there? If I hit enter, what would be the output?
Would you get name?
Why?
Because you're telling it to print that string, but you're actually not getting what you're trying to really print.
And what kind of error is that, Yang?
Is that logic?
That's right. Logic errors. The reason why you have a logic error is because you're not getting the result you intended. It's not going to give you any type of warning. I'm just not getting the result I want. I don't want name. I wanted to print that variable name, what's inside that variable name. And so let me do another thing, one more test. How can I test the data type right here? What do I need to do? I want to find out, how do I find the data type? What's
Type of.
There we go. There we go. Type of. So this is going to give me back a string, right? That's right. But that's not what I was looking for, right? For it to return, right? I didn't want the output to be that. This is what I wanted the output to give me back. And let me get rid of this type of. Oh. I wanted to give me back my name. Now, what can anybody tell me why I want it to be that way? Why I wanted to get back the output that I was looking for? How come I don't have to put the quotes around name, a variable, right? Because name is a variable, right? And the variable is a container. The container is holding the value. The value that it has is my name, Terrence. So when I console.log name the variable, it outputs what's inside the container. It didn't print name, did it? It print what was inside the container. And notice you can't have quotes around it. But let's take it up another notch, right? If I do this right here, I just add the number 2 to that and I hit enter. What's the output going to be?
I feel like
Error?
Say it again.
I said, would it be an error?
Yeah, what kind of error?
A runtime error or a syntax?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a runtime because the syntax is not the problem here, but it's going to be, it's going to tell me something. What do you think it's going to say when I hit that enter? And what's one of the data types? The primitive
String?
data types. Now, the primitive data type is one of those primitive data types.
String?
Now, the string is one of the 7, though. We got 2 of them that you haven't came across yet, and that's null and undefined. So when I hit that, it's an uncalled reference error. Well, it says name2 is not defined. How do I fix that? So this is it's an uncalled reference error. An uncalled reference or reference error is a runtime error. How do I fix that?
I think reference error, what it's trying to say is you're trying to use a variable that doesn't exist right now because you haven't declared it yet. So you have to go back.
How do I do it? How do I make this work? How do I make name2 become, I won't get that error. So how do I write that? Yeah.
Let name2, but we don't normally want to use numbers, right, in variables.
You can. Anyway, you can use it at the end. You just can't use it in the beginning.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you can use numbers. You just can't use it as the first character.
Okay.
It always has to be an underscore or a letter for the first character. It can't be a number. So now if I go ahead and hit that now, it says but that undefined just means it doesn't have a return. Now, if I come back and I hit this, is it going to give me an error warning?
I don't think so.
Okay.
It's still undefined, but it's not an error.
Correct. It's just undefined. It's not an error, but because it hasn't been defined yet. It's been declared. So I get rid of this reference error. So it's been declared and it's really been defined. It just hasn't been initialized with something. So it is giving me back a data type, which is undefined. So basically, this is what it's saying to me right now. What it's saying is, because I don't have to write let again, but if I do name, let me see, name2, this is what it's really saying right here.
Mm.
That's what it's saying. That's what it's actually saying. It's undefined. So it has a data type there. So now what I could do is I can put name2, and then I can assign a string to it, and I'll call it Mike. And now when I hit enter, Mike. Now when I come back and then I console log name2, it gives me back Mike. So remember the rule to understand how to avoid making these errors. But these type of errors, syntax and runtime errors, they're going to print you something back to the console so you can investigate. Logic errors do not. It just don't give you the output you're looking for. So that can be very challenging trying to figure out where you went wrong in your code when your syntax is right and it runs at runtime, but it's not giving you the output you're looking for. Anybody have any questions? All right. So here, oftentimes you will find it tempting to blame errors on JavaScript itself. We all do it, trust me. However, it is far more likely that the error is due to an issue with your code. We encourage you to think critically about the code you have written and whether you may have made an error in writing your code. Even senior developers make basic errors on occasion. It happens, trust me. In this chapter, we will discuss in detail common types of bugs along with some effective strategies for debugging. You will learn to rely on error messages and console.log. We're going to be using console.log early on a lot. The clues and insights, and over time, you will sharpen your debugging skills. We will also discuss how to approach writing code so as to prevent bugs from occurring in the first place. All right, anybody have any questions?
No.
Is this helpful so far? Yes, no. Do I need to go back and explain? I can go deeper now. We can spend some time on it. I see Xander gave me a thumbs up. Everybody else, is this helping you?
Yeah, I thought it was kind of neat as like when they talked about the parsing and execution that sometimes errors, like when I start writing like maybe 4 or 5 lines of code, when I go to print it, it's actually going to show me first my syntax errors and then the other ones. So they actually have an order as to how like it'll show you your errors.
It will. Now, do you know the difference now? You kind of hit on it. Can you explain a little bit more how you say it goes in order? It works from top to bottom, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So when a compiler runs into that first syntax error, the program stops. It don't go any further. So you're like, okay, I fixed that error. And then you run it again. It goes to the next line and that has an error.
Mm-hmm.
A syntax error. Syntax errors mean the program is not going to run until you fix those syntax errors. Syntax errors is making sure you have semicolons, open and closing curly braces or brackets, making sure a string has the same open and closing matching quotes. Make sure you have open and closing parentheses. Those are the little things that get you a lot with syntax errors. Those little bitty things, and they get very frustrating. But the good thing about it is when you're in your program, in your code, most of the time it'll tell you what line it's on. And that's helpful when you, depending on what IDE you're using or code editor that you're using, it'll kind of help you out there. So you've already read over this first part, right? So if so, we talked about the execution with the parsing. And for those that haven't read it or maybe have any more questions, what Ying is talking about, it's called the DOM, the document object model. The DOM reads from top to bottom. But later on, when we get into functions, functions is based on where they're called, not where they're invoked and called, not where they're created. So you could create a function out of order. But everything else in your program, it follows a hierarchy. It goes from, or a pattern, from top to bottom. And so when you write your code, and this is why it's important to only write chunks, small chunks of code. Don't write a whole entire program and never run it. Because it's going to blow up. So if you're working on write a few lines of code and make sure it works. Because if you know it works, then you add on top of it. That's a strategy. Sometimes it works great when we do it that way. Sometimes you get so busy writing code, next thing you know, you done wrote a whole function and a whole bunch of conditionals and everything, and then you wonder why it's not working because you messed up something in the beginning, and it's kind of hard finding where the error is. So you went over the stages of JavaScript execution. You went over the syntax error. So the syntax error tells us this: JavaScript can only execute a program if the program is syntactically correct. Syntactically correct. Syntax refers to the structure of a language, the spoken language, spoken programming, or otherwise. And the rules, there go that word rule again, the rules about that structure. For example, In English, a sentence must begin with a capital letter and end with the appropriate punctuation. Do we have anybody here that's really a stickler for grammar?
Mm-hmm.
Does it just irritate you when you're reading something and the punctuation ain't right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, as a human being, though, you may be able to understand what they meant, right? Because you got the experience to understand. I don't think that's what they, because the way that they wrote it, they should have put a question mark there, but they put at a period, right? So it's reading like a statement, but because you can distinguish between the two, because they used the word how in the beginning or what, you knew that they were asking a question, right?
Right.
Even though they used the wrong punctuation. But a computer program that can't understand that. We told you in chapter 1 or 2 or 3, one of them, where we said computers are dumb, right? You have to tell them every single thing right down to the very small detail. So your computer program, it won't be able to understand that you meant for that to be a question. When it gets to the end, it sees that period, it's going to think it's a statement. Because remember, it can't read English or our language. It all has to be converted to binary numbers. And all it sees is zeros and ones. Make sense? Make sense why it's important to make sure you syntactically write your code correct so you don't get these errors.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So we saw this right here. This sentence contains syntax errors, right? How many syntax errors does it contain? This sentence contains a syntax error. So it's only got one error. So what's that error?
Capitalize the first word.
There we go. Simple, right? Now, how many people actually write letters and don't capitalize the first word?
Mhm.
I know I'm guilty of it. So I am not that guy who is good at punctuation. I'm better at it now because I have to write content and I have to write emails and stuff like this. So I use Grammarly a lot. It helps me out because I was like, okay, how do I want to say this? Man, oh my goodness. Think about it for a second. I remember back in 1995 when, and I didn't notice until I did some research. Internet was deregulated in 1995. Do y'all know what that means?
I don't.
No.
Well, Bill Clinton, I was about to call him George Clinton. Bill Clinton, he signed into law that the internet is deregulated. Before 1995, it was regulated, meaning it had a lot of rules and stipulations. That means everybody couldn't buy a domain name. Back then, because I know the guy, I met the guy who bought the 33rd domain name. He lives in St. Louis. He owns the 33rd domain name. And he was saying back then, you couldn't even sell nothing on the internet. They had rules. The United States was the first to have the internet, but that goes always back to the 60s when that was invented. We didn't start learning about the internet unless you watch certain movies that talked about the internet, where they put the phone onto this thing and you be hearing that dial tone when you had to dial up and stuff like that. It hears this noise, right?
Mhm.
Well, the internet was deregulated back then. And ever since, our lives has changed. Hasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I always say the internet changed the game. The internet, we call it the information highway. We're in the information age. Before the information age, it was called the industrial age. Before that, it was called, I think, the Bronze Age and the Agriculture Age before that, I believe. And so you can go by history of the age that we're in. I don't know what's going to happen out the information age. I don't know what else can be invented. But back in 1933, they said everything that could, the patent office said, anything that could be created has been created. They were wrong. I don't think the computer, I don't know if the computer was fully created yet, but they were wrong. And the internet has changed the game. It has made us more dependent on things, don't it?
Yeah.
Think about your cell phone. Well, let's even take it back even further. Remember when I don't know if anybody, I remember when the microwave first became invented, when we first got the microwave. Back then, people were used to cooking meals from scratch. And they prepared to cook those meals. When the microwave came, it was just to heat up stuff. And then people learned how to cook in it, right? Well, that made our life a lot easier. What happened? People stopped preparing meals ahead of time. They started relying on those TV dinners. That's what we used to call them back then. TV dinners. We call them microwavable dinners now. And it made us want things a lot faster. Now, Xander may not recognize this yet because he's still young. As he gets older, it'll make more sense to him. But are you noticing how fast time is accelerating? The older you get, the faster time accelerates. I'm 50 now. I still remember my 20s, and I'm trying to figure out where they went. You look back on it, you're like, oh my goodness. You look up, you used to think 35 was old. Xander think we're old people. To him, we are old. And to me, if I see Xander, I see a child because he looks young to me when I see him, because he is young. He's a teenager. When I see Brandisha and Shina, I've been knowing y'all since y'all was little kids. And so y'all look young to me. Y'all gonna always look young to me, even when you get 50 and 60 years old. You're gonna always look young to me. Because the thing is, as I get older, the people that came after me, I'm going to, in my mind, remember them when they were children. You've only seen me as an old man. I've always been old, so you're gonna always see me as an old man. So that's just how it is. But notice time is accelerating, and we're depending more on our devices more than ever. You can't take a trip without using your GPS in your phone, right?
Right.
What's the problem with that? You don't know how to read a map.
Yeah.
You
Don't have any real sense of direction.
That's right. And guess what do you need when you get to your destination? You need your GPS to get you back home. Right?
Yeah.
Here's a saying. If you arrive at your destination and you don't know how you got there, you're still lost. So that makes sense, right? You're still lost. So if you don't know how you're getting where you're going, you're still lost. So because you want to become a software engineer, you're learning how this works. Like I just said, the reason why I went down this road, this path, was because of Grammarly. You used to have to know how to write what a complete sentence was. You had to know how to write it correctly, right? You had to remember the rules and principles. But nowadays, I just need Grammarly, and it tells me that's wrong. So guess what? What am I really doing? Am I really learning? You know what I'm saying? I'm privileged that I had the opportunity to learn without having the technology. But Xander, that's all he knows. Xander, you have a cell phone, don't you?
Yeah.
How long have you had a cell phone?
A long time.
Okay, Brandisha, how old were you when you got your first cell phone?
17.
17. How old are you, Xander?
I'm 14.
14. Now, Shanae, how old were you when you got your first cell phone? She on mute. How about you, Yang? How old are you when you got your first cell phone?
Probably about 17.
Did you buy it or did your parents buy
My parents bought it.
it? How about you, Brandisha? You buy it or your parents bought it?
My sister bought it.
Yes, somebody bought it for you, right?
Yeah.
I got my first cell phone when I was 19, 20. And I bought it myself because back then, you didn't have unlimited talk. As a matter of fact, now y'all still can remember. Now Xander may not understand this or know this, but a landline. Xander, see, we're nostalgic, Xander, because you're living in this information age from the moment you were born. You understand social media. Maybe you do this, maybe you don't, but the younger generation, and maybe y'all do it too. You document everything. People like Xander, if he's been on Facebook, from the moment he's been on Facebook or Instagram, he has this long history from the point that he joined to now that he documented his whole life. I ain't gonna say his whole life, but since he's been able to be on social media. Maybe the same way for y'all. So some people, they document everything. They tell all their business online. Guess what? You got to write a program for that. Y'all got to write a program. Y'all may come up with a great opportunity. My wife right now, she has something that she wants to create. She has, and I can help her with it because I understand how all of this works. My son, I'm teaching him how to build his own brand. He knows how to shoot videos. He learning how to shoot. He already knows how to shoot video. He knows how to edit videos. He used to do music videos and everything for people. And now I'm showing him how to really build his brand. He works from, I pick him up early in the morning. At 5 in the morning, he comes over here and he works at the laptop because we got some tools that I introduced him to. And he's learning how to do it so he can make money. You have an opportunity to change your life doing this. Like I was telling you, Brandisha, so I said, tell your husband to contact me. I want to see if he's interested because we're trying to build a team so he can learn something where he wants to make money, side money. Right now, start off as side hustle money, but eventually it becomes your main hustle because the money comes in so frequently that eventually you can live off of it.
Right.
That's where you want to be.
He needs your number again. He doesn't have a lot of the old numbers. He got a new phone.
Oh, no problem. I'll send it to you. Also,
Okay.
I got to get in touch with your aunt, Eileen. You had left her number, but I was saying send her the invite link, but she hasn't done it yet.
Oh, yeah.
So I'll give her a call.
Okay.
All right, so let's finish this up for today. So here we got some code here. It says find the syntax error in the program. Let's go ahead and open up the Replit. Let's look at that. I like to play around with the code. That's what helps you to understand what you're dealing with. Now we're in Replit here. Now you can hit you see this little button right here I'm hovering over? If you click that, that closes that tab. So right here, can anybody tell me what's the error right here? Look closely at it. Before I run it, what's wrong with it?
It needed the parentheses and the quotes around Wednesday.
Okay, so it got 2 errors then. When you say quote, you're talking about the quotes right here, right? So let me run it first. We got a syntax error. It's telling you day, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying that it's missing that parenthesis, right?
Well, I was talking about the quotes around the word Wednesday.
Okay.
Get a string, and I put it in quotes, and then it came out with no error.
Okay. But if I go by this first, what happened? It gave me a syntax error, right?
Yeah.
So right there, if I run it, what happens if I run it again? What's going to happen? Is it going to work, or is this going to be a problem?
Is it gonna print undefined?
Well, look closely at it. Remember the rule and the principle. Think like the compiler. You should eventually, you want to get to the point to where you know what the output is before you run it. We already gave me one hint. It gave us this first one. Day was missing the closing parenthesis.
Mm-hmm.
What is, remember the rule and the think like the compiler. Start with the first line. You got let. We know that's correct. We got day. So what's next? I'm assigning what? Wednesday. And what is Wednesday?
You want to make it a string?
There we go. So let me run it. This time it says a reference error. Wednesday is not defined.
Right.
So we got another syntax error, right? So let me correct something. I said that reference error. No, did I say? Yeah, reference error. I said it was a runtime error. No, it's a syntax error. So let me make sure I correct that. So now if I run it, it works.
Right.
So this is why it's so important to play with the code. So you can do different variations here. So if I go here and I do this, what's going to happen? What kind of error am I going to get?
The undefined error.
Or not defined.
Not defined.
There it is. Day is not defined because this is where it's coming from right there. Because I'm trying to print to the console day, but it's not defined. So what the compiler is saying that, wait a minute, this don't make sense. But notice that it did the console.log first. And then it works backwards. So first I have to address why this is not right. So if I go ahead and put the 1 there, it's going to work.
Sure.
So this is now what I was talking about, the DOM, it reads from top to bottom. This is how it's going to read top to bottom. Like I said, right? Okay, so I just put all of those in there first, right? So I'm going to do this. I'm going to do console. I'm going to do 3 console.logs, right? So I'm going to get rid of this, and then I want to see the order that it's in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And notice that the second variable, I did a camel case, right? So I'm going to just make these errors, make these print out wrong, right? So better yet, I'm going to do this first. I want you to see how it goes in order. So if I run this, all of these are going to print. So I'm going to leave that one off. Okay, so let's see how this order goes, right? So we're going from top to bottom. So you notice here, it started with Wednesday first, right?
Mhm.
So if I go in here, I notice that I'm missing that ending. Well, so now let me run it. Then it went to Thursday. What does the syntax error? Is an invalid unexpected token again, right?
Mhm.
So I fixed that. Then it went to the reference error. Again, Friday is not defined because I don't have any strings around it, right? So all of those were syntax errors, right?
Yeah.
Now they're all going to run, right? Now
Mhm.
let's go back and let's do this again. Because what I want you to see here, those console.logs are like functions. The reason why it's reading these first is because it's where they're being invoked. They're invoked first. So that's why it's not giving you line 1, 2, and 3 errors first. It's going to deal with the console.logs first. So, oh, well, I guess it did do it right here. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, because you know what? Because I got this still in there. So if I make this like this is what I want to change. So if I did all of this right here, I changed all those variable names. So, which is still throwing me off there because did I do that right? Day 2, 3, day 1. Still telling me that this is wrong because at first, oh, you know why? Because I have multiple console.logs. That's what it is. Okay, I get it. It's giving, I have multiple console.logs. If I just had just one console.log, it would read the console.log first. But because I have multiple console.logs, and now it's going to give me the console.logs now, because day 2 is not defined. So it went down into the order. It was kind of confusing because we only had one console.log and one string. Because I have multiple now, it goes in order. That makes sense?
Mhm.
All right. So what syntax error did you find? We already went over that. Now here, this is the runtime error. This is the one that's the ones we're going to deal with. The syntax will be correct, but the runtime is going to be wrong. So it says the second category consists of runtime. So that means at runtime, I'm gonna have different errors for runtime, which I guess reference error can be a runtime because I did say it was a runtime, so I don't want to keep confusing you out. So I guess you could be seeing it as a runtime too, I think. Let me look. Let me see, what is it telling me here? First name is not defined. Okay. Yeah, so it's the runtime because that wasn't, do y'all see what's wrong with this?
Was it that the N and name isn't capitalized?
Correct. So it's not matching. Just like what we were playing around here, they wasn't matching. That's why we're getting the reference errors right here. But according to this, and I just want to make sure we're not confusing, reference error is a runtime error. So I was right at first, and I threw myself off because it had that syntax error in it. So it tells us here, the second category consists of runtime errors, so called because they do not appear until you run the program. So reference error is always a runtime error. It's not dealing with a syntax. It may be telling you the syntax is wrong, but it's still a runtime error. So these errors are also called exceptions. Remember that word, exceptions, because they usually indicate that something exceptional, which means bad, has happened. Runtime errors occur during the execution phase of a program. Remember that execution phase. So when you're reading this, take some notes. So we will only encounter them after the syntax of our program is completely correct. A common runtime error occurs when we try to use the variable that has not been created yet. This can happen if you misspell. That's a common problem because I do it too. You know what I do? I don't want y'all to copy and paste stuff right now because I want you to learn. I want you to type it all out. But when I'm dealing with big programs and I'm writing stuff, I'm copying and pasting the variable names. Because y'all ain't gonna tell you how many times I done wrote a variable name wrong or misspelled one. And then my program blows up and I'm like, why is, and then I changed it in a whole bunch of areas. I'm like, ain't that nothing? So I can make sure I don't do that, I always copy and paste my variable names whenever I'm checking something. So here we see it right here. First name variable is declared camel case. That's a rule that we use in programming. We use it as a camel case. Yep, and like you said, it shows at the end of 6.4 shows a table of the types of errors and the characteristics of the errors. Yep, it sure does. And so as you continue to go through the chapter, read up on it, and then like here, logic error, like I said, it doesn't give you what you expected. So right here it says we create a weekly pay. We said 600. Now let's think about this one for a second. This one is a good one. I'm gonna put this over here, and we're gonna call it a day after we do this one. All right. Why is this a problem? Think logically. Can anybody tell me why this may not give you the results you're thinking about? You got a weekly pay of $600, and you create a variable called daily earnings, weekly pay divided by 7, right? And then we console.log daily earnings. How much money were you expecting to make in a week? So we run that. It says 85, right? What output really was you expecting when you think of weekly pay of $600? How much do you think it should have been broken down to? What was the result you think you should have gotten? How many days a week do you normally work?
5.
5 days, right? But we're dividing it by 7. You really wanted 5 there because that's how many days you normally work. And so you was looking for that to be over $120. Matter of fact, let's do it at 5, because that's a whole number. And that's what you was expecting, to have $100 for your weekly pay for each day. So weekly pay is $500, but the daily earnings, you was expecting $100 a day, right?
Mm.
That's what you were daily. And that's why I say variables have to be descriptive. Daily earnings. Weekly pay is the variable right here. We're using it. And what is this right here called right here? Can anybody tell me what is that called right there? Weekly pay divided by 5 is a what? We talked about it earlier. When you have 2 or more values, it's a what?
Expression.
Expression. Yeah.
There we go. It's an expression. Because guess what? Weekly pay divided by 5 is not. So if I go down here and right here in daily earnings, it didn't print out weekly pay divided by 5. It printed out the value, which was 100, right? So let me do it like this so you can understand. If I go ahead and just put a number right there, it's going to print out. Now it's going to print out 5 because that's the value, right? 5 is a value. If I have 2 or more values, it's an expression. So I want y'all to remember that. That's confusing. That gets a lot of people hemmed up, the difference between expressions and values. People want to say this is all a value right here, and it's not. It's an expression that equates to a value. In the end, it's what's only variables store values. Remember that. They don't store the expression. They only store the value. It stores what the expression evaluates to. That makes sense? Any questions?
No.
All right. Did y'all learn anything today?
Yes.
All right, cool. All right, so I'm going to stop the recording right there. And then do y'all have any questions? Anybody